You know, you can get your name in a lot of books. Miss Debbie can tell you in Greensville County, if you live as a resident and your name is in a book, it's called the tax rolls. And you know that because we get those little bills in the mail for your car taxes and your property tax. Your name's in a book because you're a resident there. There's a thing called the phone book. I don't know how many of you know what I'm talking about. You know what we did with our phone book? We just threw it in the trash because nobody ever looks at it. We don't hardly need it anymore. Used to be it was a big deal to have your advertisement in the yellow pages. Things have changed. But I remember when we first moved here and we got our phone book, do you know whose name I looked up first? Mine. I wanted to see if my name was in the book. Our daughter got an application one time. You have been nominated as Teacher of the Year. And there's going to be a who's who among teachers, and she got her name and she filled out this application because someone that loved her nominated her. And guess what she had to do? She had to buy the book so she could prove her name was in the Teacher of the Year book. They're pretty smart, aren't they? The Teacher of the Year, and they get you can get your poetry published. On TV, you see all kinds of ads. Oh, you can get your book published. Christian publishers. Do you want your book published? Sure, they'll publish your book. Why? Because they're going to charge you for it. They're going to sell you 200 or 300 of your own books so you can get your name in a book. After we moved here, I had to update my passport, and I had to prove I was born. I think, isn't it pretty obvious I was born? But my North Carolina birth certificate was a facsimile. It was a reverse print. It was black with silver or white lettering. It was not considered an original. So I had to call Raleigh and give them the date of my birth, where I was born at Moses Cone Hospital in June the 25th, 1955. But I could prove I was born, but I had to get it in the book. I had to get the official statement. I have a little book here called Who's Who in the Bible. Carlos, I don't know if you can see these things close enough. And it's a book of every name that's in the Bible. And you know, when I look up Clement, there's nothing to say of Clement except, yes, he was mentioned in Philippians chapter 4. Not all of us are going to go down in history. I was watching Chip and Joanna Gaines' interview this week, and they were talking about the price they were paying for, quote, fame. They said it was tough on their family. They couldn't go anywhere without people flooding them. And they had to just stop and sit back and take a year off to readjust their lives. They got their names on the rolls, and they were famous. When Cindy and I went to college, we were, not one of you in this auditorium or in this audience knows that Cindy and I were who's who among college students in 1978. You didn't know that, did you? Because it wasn't important to you. And I've got the yearbook here to prove it. I can look in the back of this yearbook and find Rick Reagan and Cindy Reagan, because we were married by the time we were seniors in college. And this proves our name is in the book. And let me tell you how important this was to us. This is not our original yearbook. We bought this from a person online. Because our original yearbooks, we had two of them because we were both registered students. They got all musty in a storage shelter one time, and they just smelled so musty. And when we were about to move one time, I said to her, "These books don't mean anything to us." And I burned them because they smelled funny. I didn't want to haul them off to the next place. And then last year, I found out that there were some of these books available from Tennessee Temple University. So I ordered one. It was probably $15 from another student. Back in 1988, Cindy and I went through a tragedy, and I wrote some music. And because of that, Uh, my therapy for that time was to write music, and I got my name on a book. How? Because I paid to publish it. And I'll tell you how important all that is. It isn't. Because things come and go. My question to you today, and I have asked myself this question this week, is your name in the book of life? I didn't ask you, were you a church member? I don't care if you've been sprinkled or dunked. I don't care if you know the catechism. Doesn't really matter if you're a deacon or an elder or a song leader. My question is your name in God's book. Let me read you some scriptures. First of all, if you Google the book of life, here's what you're going to find out. There was a World Book series. Some of you may have had a set of World Book encyclopedias called the Book of Life and the Book of Knowledge. Also, there's an animated series that I'd never heard of about a love triangle in Mexico, and Tatum Channing was one of the voices on this. Never have heard of it, but it was called The Book of Life. I looked at a clip of it, didn't even want to bother to figure that one out. Wikipedia knows what the Book of Life is. Wikipedia will tell you this. In Christianity and Judaism, the Book of Life is the book in which God records the names of every person who is destined for heaven or the world to come. Now, Wikipedia is not always accurate. Anybody can put something on Wikipedia, but they got that one right. The Book of Life is mentioned 7 times in the Book of Revelation, and of course other places too. Only those names are written in the Book of Life from the foundation of the world that have not been blotted out by the Lamb. Now, that's a strange concept there. They're saved at the last judgment. I challenge you, read Revelation 20 and 21. We don't want to think there's a final judgment. We would like to think that God is some great big granddaddy in the sky that's going to go, oh, come on in. It's all right. But he's not. God is not going to excuse our sin. He is not going to be the grandpa at the judgment that says, oh, you're okay. You did better than he did. No, we're not going to be compared to anybody else. When James Ricky Reagan, my mama named me Ricky after Ricky Nelson, popular name in the 50s. When I stand before God, I can't say, but Lord, look what that man did. Or, Lord, look, how about my wife? Or how about my kids? No. And I'm not going to stand before God with a list of things I did well. I knew a woman one time that at the end of every church year, she would give the deacons a list of everything she had done for Jesus all year long. Let me tell you something. God's keeping better books, because God's keeping the books of what we don't do right. In the Old Testament, there is a mention of a book of remembrance. I'm going to read this because this is not part of our scripture, but if you'll go ahead and turn to Daniel 12 while I'm reading this. In the book of Malachi, a book of remembrance was written before him for those who fear the Lord and who meditate on his name. That is not the book of life. This week I have read every passage I could find. I had a stack of study Bibles on the coffee table the other day, and my wife said, "Whoa, what are you doing?" I said, "I'm trying to read everything I can on this subject." In the prophecy of Daniel, look at Daniel chapter 12 and verse 1. There will be a time of trouble. Now you realize Daniel's revelation, he is looking at the time of the tribulation. He's also looking at the time of the 1,000-year reign of Christ. And then God gave him insights to what's going to happen at the final judgment. There shall be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation, even to that time. Now, my mom and dad were married in 46. They went through a very tough time during the Second World War. But their parents went through a tough time during the First World War. The grandparents during the Civil War. And so many times we think, oh, this is the most terrible thing. This world is a mess. This is the most terrible thing that can happen. And lately in the last year, maybe some of you have felt like, I don't think things should get any worse. They are going to get worse. He said, at that time your people will be delivered. Everyone who is found written in your book.